It had been a long, exhausting day on the trail. Catherine, Lucas, Ben, and Olivia, a close-knit group of friends, had set out on a hiking trip in the deep forests of Maine, hoping to explore the untouched wilderness. They had heard stories about the eerie beauty of Hollow Creek, a secluded area near an abandoned logging town, but no one had ever dared to venture too far into the woods. The town had long been abandoned, but the creek still ran wild through the forest, hidden from the outside world. The sun was starting to set when they arrived at the clearing, a small patch of land by the creek where they planned to set up camp. The atmosphere was quiet, but there was something unsettling about the place. The trees seemed to whisper in the wind and the creek gurgled softly, almost as if it was calling them. "I don't know about this place," Olivia said, her voice filled with unease. "It's too quiet." "Stop being such a baby," Lucas replied, trying to lighten the mood. "It's just a creek. Let's make camp before it gets dark." The group set up their tents and started a fire, the light from the flames dancing on the trees around them. As night fell, the forest around them seemed to change. The sounds of the woods, the rustling of leaves, the calls of distant animals faded away, leaving only an eerie silence. "I'm telling you, something's wrong," Olivia said, her eyes darting nervously. "This place, it doesn't feel right. Don't start with that superstition," Ben replied. "We're fine." But despite Ben's reassurances, the others couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The whispers returned, faint at first, like the sound of leaves brushing against each other. Then they grew louder, closer, until it was impossible to ignore. Catherine, unable to stand it any longer, stood up and peered into the dark woods. "Do you guys hear that?" Before anyone could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows, its outline barely visible in the moonlight. It was tall and gaunt, wearing tattered, dark clothing. The group froze, their hearts pounding. The figure stood motionless, watching them with cold, empty eyes. "Who are you?" Lucas called out, but the figure didn't respond. Instead, it slowly turned and began to walk toward the creek. Without saying a word, the group followed. They couldn't explain why, but something about the figure's presence drew them toward the water's edge, as if an invisible force was guiding them. When they reached the creek, they saw something that made their blood run cold. At the center of the water, a circle of stones was arranged in a perfect pattern, the surface of the creek still and calm within the circle. On the stones lay a human figure, sprawled out on its back, its limbs twisted unnaturally, its face obscured by a hood. That's not possible," Catherine whispered, taking a step back. "This place, it's not natural." Before anyone could respond, the whispers grew louder, now filling the air around them. The figure in the center of the circle began to stir. The hooded figure rose to its feet, its movements jerky and unnatural, like a puppet controlled by invisible strings. Suddenly, the figure turned toward them. "You shouldn't have come here," it spoke, its voice hollow and distant. The group froze in fear, unable to move. The figure raised its arms, and the stones around the creek began to glow. The whispers turned into a chant, the words unintelligible, but filled with an unmistakable power. "What the hell is happening?" Ben gasped, his voice trembling. The figure spoke again. "You are trespassing on sacred ground. The ritual must be completed." Before they could understand what it meant, the ground beneath them trembled. The trees around them shook violently, and the air grew heavy, oppressive. The figure's hands began to move in a slow, deliberate pattern, as though conducting an unseen force. "Run!" Lucas shouted, but as he turned to flee, the path back to their camp vanished. The trees seemed to close in around them, forming a wall of twisted branches and leaves. They were trapped in the ritual's grasp. Panic set in as the group realized they were being drawn into something much darker than they could have imagined. The forest was alive, its very essence pulsing with the power of the ritual. The stones around the creek began to hum, vibrating with an energy that felt ancient and malicious. "We need to get out," Catherine screamed, but her voice was drowned out by the rising chant. Then, one by one, they were forced to their knees by an unseen force, their bodies unable to move, as if the earth itself was holding them in place. The figure walked toward them, its hood still obscuring its face. "The ritual is nearing completion," it intoned, its voice growing louder, more commanding. "You will become part of the forest. Your souls will feed the land." Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she looked around. "Please, no, we didn't mean to intrude. We'll leave. Just let us go." But the figure ignored her, raising its hands to the sky. The chant grew louder, the stones around them now glowing with an unnatural light. The force holding them down intensified, and they felt as if their very souls were being ripped from their bodies, pulled into the earth beneath them. The last thing they saw was the figure's face, twisted, decayed, and inhuman. Then, the world around them went dark. Epilogue. Months passed before anyone returned to Hollow Creek. When they did, they found the stones still standing, the creek flowing as if nothing had changed. The forest was eerily quiet, and the air was thick with an oppressive energy. But the friends who had entered the forest that night were never seen again. Locals whispered that Hollow Creek was cursed, that the ritual was not just a myth, but a very real force that claimed those who dared to trespass on its sacred grounds. Some said that on moonless nights, you could hear the whispers of those who had disappeared, trapped forever in the ritual's grip, their souls feeding the land, their bodies never to be found. And the figure, cloaked in shadows, still watches from the creek, waiting for the next souls to claim.